Harriet Harman, who's been having a bit of a rough ride this week. She, her husband, Jack Dromney, he's also an MP, and former Labour Minister Patricia Hewitt have been, at least they would argue, the victim of a smear campaign by the Daily Mail. The paper says all three of them should have done more to sever the affiliation between what was then called the National Council of Civil Liberties. They all worked for it then in the 70s. And something called the Paedophile Information Exchange, PI for short. Harriet Harman had this to say yesterday.
Nothing I've done is secret. There is nothing hidden to be discovered about me. I have been in public life for more than 30 years, and all of those years have been about protecting the vulnerable, protecting women and children, and that's why I find it so unfair and offensive that the Daily Mail should put smear and innuendo on me, as if somehow I supported those people that all my public life I've been fighting against. And I think that they are wrong to be doing that, and that's why I'm speaking out. So please don't keep asking me whether or not I apologise for what I've done. I stand by it. I fought to protect the vulnerable. This was a vile organisation. I regret the fact they ever existed. I supported laws to protect children, and, you know, I stand by what I've done.
And we're joined now by the Daily Mail's Andrew Pearce. Welcome, Andrew. It's unusual for me to get to interview you like this. What exactly has Harriet Harman done wrong?
Harriet Harman in that interview also yesterday said that the PI, the Paedophile Information Exchange, had been swept away. It was not influential in the National Council for Civil Liberties. We see on the front page of the Telegraph today that simply wasn't the case. In 1979, a year after Harriet joined what is now known as Liberty, Tom O'Carroll, who was the chairman of the Paedophile Information Exchange, was serving on a National Council for Civil Liberties committee.
But what has she done wrong? She was the legal advisor at the time. What has she done wrong?
I'll tell you what she's done wrong. She never made any attempt formally to sever the links between that body and an organisation that was campaigning for sex with children at 4 or abolishing the age of consent altogether. And I think it's extraordinary that she can't even bring herself today to say that that was wrong and that she should and I think she should apologise for it. I think she should be, Andrew, she should be profoundly guilty that she was associated with for associating with an organisation, taking money from an organisation that was advocating sex with 4-year-olds.
Are you saying that she should apologise for giving succour to paedophiles?
What I'm saying is...
Are you saying that?
What I'm saying is this, that the Paedophile Information Exchange, by having an aura of respectability, by being affiliated to a respectable campaign organisation, that helped promote a climate in which paedophiles could flourish.
But was she ever an apologist for it?
No, but
so did she ever defend it?
She never. I don't know whether she defended it or not. What she's never done is she never called for that organisation's link to be severed.
Is there any evidence that the affiliation of this organisation ever influenced anything she stood for? Did she ever try to water down child pornography laws?
The National Council for Civil Liberties was campaigning for a more relaxed approach to pornography. Was that influenced by PI? I don't know.
But everybody on the left in the 1970s and many on the right was looking for a more relaxed approach to pornography.
I don't think that's true, actually, but never mind.
Well, many people were. I'm not sure that meant that they wanted a more relaxed approach to child pornography. Do you have any evidence that Harriet Harman was in favour of a more relaxed approach to child pornography?
She signed a document in 1978 which said there should be no prosecutions involving photographs of children unless it could be shown that the child had been damaged. Isn't surely any child damaged if it's exposed to that sort of photography?
Well, it depends if
she
it's
signed that document.
Photography.
The fact is,
this is a kind of, it's a, look, the NCCL clearly, in retrospect, which she didn't run, Patricia Hewitt.
She was a legal officer.
She was a legal officer. Well, legal officers are there to give advice. I mean, clearly, in retrospect, being associated in any way with PI was a stupid thing to have done. But I'm not sure where Harriet Harman has to carry the blame for this. I mean, this is surely just a tenuous smear campaign.
We've asked all three of them, actually, not just Harriet Harman, also Patricia Hewitt, who was running the organisation, and Jack Dromney, her husband, who was involved. It's not a smear campaign. The police returned to PI in the aftermath of the Jimmy Savile revelations. Who was the MP at Westminster who was calling loudest for the BBC to be more open and transparent about Jimmy Savile and paedophilia? Harriet Harman, in her role as Shadow Culture Secretary.
Let me bring you in.
Sorry, I've been desperate to get in. I do apologise.
But can I just say one other thing?
No,
just
no.
one thing. Because Shami Chakrabarti, who now runs Liberty, which succeeded the National Council for Civil Liberties, she didn't hesitate. She said she's ashamed and disgusted of what the National Council for Civil Liberties did in being affiliated to a paedophile organisation.
I think what the Daily Mail has done in this tenuous link to try and smear Harriet Harman is outrageous, frankly. Harriet Harman has an outstanding record of over 30 years' work, and everybody, if you asked any member of the public, they would say Harriet Harman, rightly or wrongly, is someone who stands up for women's rights, who's talked about sexual exploitation, who's talked about maternity rights and such like. There is not shred of evidence that she's associated with this, and you made too many links in your argument.
Why did she not, on her interview with Laura Kuenssberg on Newsnight, simply say it was clearly a mistake for Pi to be allowed to affiliate to the NCCL?
Well, the first thing was that what the Daily Mail have been really pushing the argument is that she should apologise.
No, I'm not asking you. I'm asking why did she not say that? She was given seven opportunities to do so, and she didn't.
Well, at the time of the way that the NCCL was structured at that time, Pi, as I understand it, were associated at very extreme margins. It was a very wide organisation, and there was all debates.
They had people on some of the committees.
There was all debates about freedom of speech.
They had people on the committees.
There was a debate in NCCL at the time about freedom of speech and whether or not people would be allowed to affiliate. Now, there's one, you can argue about the mechanics of that organisation, but what the Daily Mail are doing is something different. They are saying that there is a link between Harriet Harman as a legal officer and somehow some complicity with paedophilia. That is your assumption,
and you should be clear about that.
No, but let me pursue that. You are saying, let me pursue this point. You are saying that somehow, because the mechanics of the way that organisation was structured, that there's some degree of complicity on Harriet Harman's part with paedophilia, and I think that's a slur.
All right.
I think that's a smear, and you haven't any evidence to support that.
Well, let me ask you that. Are you saying that she was in any way complicit with Pi?
I'm saying by not disaffiliating from that organisation, they got rid of Pi 6 years after, a year after Harriet Harman left the National Council for Civil Liberties. She should have, as a campaigner for women's rights and children's rights, she should have got that affiliation severed.
Let's accept that, first of all, they should never have let Pi affiliate in the first place. Let's accept that they were too slow to get rid of them. But do you have any evidence that she was in any way complicit with anything that Pi stood for?
We've never suggested. We have never suggested that Harriet Harman supports paedophilia.
Or why are you so insistent on
hold on. Never suggested
here. In any way complicit is the key question. Has she been in any way complicit? Do you have any evidence to support that?
I think everybody who was running the National Council for Civil Liberties at the time, in a sense, was complicit for not making, for not disassociating, for not disassociating with that group which supports paedophilia.
That could be regarded as an error of judgment, but it doesn't make her complicit.
A very serious error of judgment, for which I think they should all apologise.
For what?
For the error of judgment.
That's it.
It's a very serious error of judgment, Andrew, to sit on a committee with a man who was later locked up for paedophilia.
Do you not think...
A year after she joined the organisation, a man who was later locked up for paedophilia, who was the chairman of the Paedophile Information Exchange, as a report in the front of the Telegraph today, not just my newspaper.
But we can all be part of organisations. I mean, it's like saying you shouldn't be with the BBC because Jimmy Savile was at his most rampant when he was in the BBC. Well, I'm saying to you, you shouldn't be with the Daily Mail that used to support Hitler.
Let's be very...
What's been the other big story about Miliband this week?
Well, this upstaged the Tory conference.
Yes.
The Daily Mail managed to sort of not merely shoot its own foot off, but sort of blow it off with a mortar. They had a go at Miliband's father. They ran a piece saying, this is the man who hated Britain, on the evidence of one entry in a diary when he was 16, when he just arrived as a refugee in this country.
He fought for the country in the Second World War.
Yeah. So it was the most sort of pathetic piece.
The Daily Mail accused the father of being a committed Marxist. But what's the point of being an uncommitted Marxist?
Oh, we all... Even if we suppose and make the leap of faith that, you know, his old man did hate Britain. My dad hated David Bowie. I think Hunky Dory is a masterpiece. It doesn't work like that.
But apparently they've played the national anthem outside the grave and the corpse hasn't stood up and saluted, so therefore that's all the proof they need.
What I think will be embarrassing, the editor of the Mail is owned by the Rothermere family.
Yeah.
Once you start saying, well, you know, what did your dad do? The current Lord Rothermere's father loved Britain so much he went to live in France as a tax exile. He then passed on that non-dom status to his son, who doesn't actually pay the normal amount of tax, despite owning a newspaper that's owned through various companies in Bermuda. So once you start doing, I'm looking at your family, it gets embarrassing. And I think the Rothermere family, if you want to go further back, we get to the great-grandfather who, let's join in together, ran the headline, "Hurrah for the black shirts."
Yeah. But the Daily Mail went on to publish a full-page apology for that, didn't they?
What, for the black shirts?
Yeah.
They didn't. No, they didn't. Once you start throwing this stuff around, it gets embarrassing, and I think, you know, they will find that their editor is now a major embarrassment.
Yeah, gone toxic. The figures they kept saying when he was on Newsnight, the fellow they actually did put on Newsnight to be the fall guy and the patsy, he said, oh, well, if you're going to go back 80 years... Look, as opposed to the 75 years, you're going back for Ed Miliband.
Yeah, when he was 17.
There's a 75-year cut-off point. That's how journalism works.
I mean, I thought it's quite funny that Dacre's nickname at the Mail is Mugabe. Because he's very old, he won't retire, and he hates the opposition.
The ancestor, the first Viscount Rothermere of the current owner of the Daily Mail, do you know what he had to say about Britain's enemies, the Nazis, in 1933?
Open the borders.
He said, I urge all British young men to study closely the progress of this Nazi regime in Germany. They must not be misled by the misrepresentations of its opponents, who have started a clamorous campaign of denunciation against what they call Nazi atrocities, which consist merely of a few isolated acts of violence. Yes, this is the Labour Party conference and the Daily Mail's character assassination of Marxist historian Ralph Miliband, who they described as the man who hated Britain. For legal reasons, we can't make any derogatory comments about Daily Mail editor Paul Dacre, but apparently his dad's an arsehole. Sorry, was an arsehole. Education Secretary Michael Gove is one of the few people to defend the Daily Mail, saying that political commentators should always have a right to offend. I couldn't agree more, you four-eyed reptilian tosspot.
Charge that you're giving to, and it's a very serious charge, and I'm very surprised you've made it, that Harriet Harman is complicit, complicit by some degree with paedophilia because she was part of an organisation that I think Tessa Gill described as anarchic in its organisation. There's some of these extreme, vile, terrible people have said...
The Daily Mail has never suggested, and I'll clarify it now, we have never suggested, and we would not wish to suggest that Harriet Harman had in any way supported paedophilia.
Can I just say, Andrew, I think that from the Daily Mail, you should apologise for that if you're asking Harriet Harman to complain. We talk about the sexual exploitation of children.
It's not on a par with what Pi was getting up to.
No,
it's a photograph.
But I will take no lessons from you on moral outrage when that's the way you treat 12-year-olds.
Chris Grayling, do you have a view on this?
You're
doing these interviews. Where's your editor?
He's busy editing the paper, Andrew.
Shouldn't he be
defending? What you always did when you were editing the Sunday Times.
Actually, I always appeared to defend what I had put on my front page. Why has he set you up instead?
He's happy to get on with editing the paper. He did a better job at that. He does a good job at it too.
Well, tell him our...
I'll tell him you missed him.
Tell him our seat's always open. We're very happy to have you, of course.
Thank you very much. Always nice to be here.